Okay, the reading from Emmett Fox is titled Mental Assent. When you give your mental assent to any idea, good or bad, you associate yourself with that idea and you incorporate it into your consciousness to the extent that you realize it. When you read a passage of scripture, you will, if you assent to it mentally, incorporate it into your life to that extent. This law, of course, works the other way too. If when you hear or read of some piece of injustice or cruelty, you approve it mentally by thinking that it serves him right, you are associating yourself with that deed and making it a part of your own life, even though you do not speak a word. It is the mental assent that counts. Give your assent only to truth. And there's a reading from Romans chapter 7, verse 22, 23, and 25. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my numbers, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity. So then with the mind, I myself serve the law of God.
And Lamsa's is almost identical, the Lamsa translation. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man, but I see another law in my members warring against the law of my mind, and it makes me a captive. Now, therefore, with my mind, then there's a verse that it jumps over where Paul is saying, I want to get rid of this body. But then the final piece is, now therefore with my mind I am a servant of the law of God. So talking about the conflict between what Sister Pepper used to call the spiritual self of ourselves and the carnal self of ourselves. Well, folks, today I guess I need to confess, this turned out to be a far bigger topic than I was planning to cover. So after 17 pages of notes and running out of time, I said, okay, we're going to start, we'll see where we end up, but we may end up turning this into 2 or 3 conversations as we go along. The title was From Silence to Speaking Truth, and it started based on something from Hildegard of Bingen talking about how important silence was to find the authentic self, and then from the authentic self to be able to stand for and live truth. And just the point of why aren't we in the authentic self now is taking the first 7 pages of this. There was a note from a spirit guide called Loner Wolf. And what he wrote was, as a spirit guide, the first obstacle I see fellow travelers come across when trying to find their path in life is the realization that they don't know who they are. That's in bold. They fail to listen to the soul within and instead create mental ideas or dreams of what they should be like and begin to doubt themselves whether they are living up to those notions. And this goes to something I say often to a client in Lift, that we come into the world, into the womb, as innocence. Hey world, I'm okay, you're okay, the world's okay, let's have fun together. And then it's the experiences we have in womb and the first 10 years, as far as Lift is concerned, that get in the way of that innocence, of that authentic self. And there are a number of writers who define the authentic self or try to relate it to what an innocent child experiences in life, where it's having fun, innocence, laughter, pure joy in existence. But what happens to get us away from that? And bear in mind that the traditional Christian definition is very different, that you come into this world as a sinner, in which case you've already lost your innocence. And that's not where we come from. And that's not where this loner wolf comes from, nor lift, nor my Quaker faith. What happens is that as we are exposed to the world, and particularly after we come out at birth, we become, well, one writer says we become domesticated. That when we run into people who do, or at situations which do not respond well to who we are being, then we experience what might be called punishment or negative feedback. And that's when we start covering ourselves over with false selves, because we have an innate need to have people feel good, that people are feeling good around us. And if we have to put on the dog, if we have to put on a show, if we have to present a false self, well, think of victims of abuse as an extreme case, where if you're not smiling all the time, Papa's going to whip you. So you end up moving into adulthood. And I had a case like this, and bear in mind that when I describe a case, I've made enough changes you'll never know the person, even if they're your best friend. But someone high up in business organizations, highly regarded, national figure, but when they started doing the healing, they crumbled. And they were just sobbing. We had to do a whole bunch of emotional damage repair because their whole life had been a front to cover up the abuse, the non-love, the refusal of loving interactions that they'd had with their parents, with their family. All of us have that to some extent or other. And what Hildegard of Bingen talked about was allowing ourselves to get back to the purity of true joy, of true living. And how do we find our way back? There was another person wrote, how do we lose our authenticity? And they wrote, watching children play and hearing their genuine laughter is one of the greatest joys in life. We were all born as children filled with life, a sense of wonder, the desire to explore and live in the moment. Children have no past baggage or future anxieties, so they express what they feel and they aren't afraid to love unconditionally. But about age 3, they start to become more tamed. Something developmentally changes, and we begin to lose the wonder, the innocence of childhood. Now, as we move into these false fronts, we also move into a more fragile sense of existence. Our self-worth becomes painfully fragile. And this is what this particular writer called domestication. And I find this interesting because in the study of development of animals, and particularly of domestic animals, they define a difference between a tamed animal and a domesticated animal. And really what this person is talking about is a tamed animal. The difference is, technically, that a domesticated animal has actually changed its structural form, its skeletal form, its personality, to better connect and interact and mold into human interaction and human living. A tamed animal has the same skeletal structure as a wild one, but through things like feeding them treats when they do the right thing, punishing them when they don't, they learn to behave in a way that is acceptable to human beings. But if they have kids, the kids are going to be naturally wild unless they are tamed also. Whereas in the domesticated animals, the children are just already born into the same set of modified skeletal structures, modified behaviors, so that they are part of our human life, part of our human team. So what this person is talking about is, in fact, how society tries to tame us, because we still have our authentic selves within, but it gets buried deeper and deeper when someone looks askance at you, or a teacher raps you on the knuckles, or the person that you like in first grade suddenly turns their nose at you because you didn't do exactly the way they wanted you to do something. And every one of those false selves, every one of those protective shields that we erect, move us farther and away from the divinely given, authentic being, which we are, which we deserve to be, which is a natural part of our divine self. And so let's see, what do we want to define as the authentic self? Let's say where we want to head. Your authentic self, one person writes, is your truest, most genuine, and natural inner essence. Some people, this author writes, call this innate quality the soul or the higher self. But the authentic self isn't just a remote or hidden quality. It is something that we can also actively experience. When we learn how, or are able to move back to being able to step into our authentic self, our life becomes richer, it has more meaning, a stronger sense of purpose, joy, peace, and creativity. Because we no longer have those barriers in front of those that we can't access. Another writer says, authenticity is where your mind and body are aligned with your actions. And then a third person wrote, your authentic self is the person who is buried deep beneath the mask and character that you play in life. So I posit to you here, every one of us here, choosing to be on a spiritual path is also working to move past these masks we've created, these false personalities, Tim's letting him in, that are getting in the way of our true selves, our divine essence. So I suggest a wonderful part of our spiritual goal is to allow our false pieces to safely fall away. And I use the word safely because I'm remembering when I was in a therapy group, someone who decided, having realized where the damage came from, that they were going to throw it all out right now. And they were going to march forward as their real self. And the counselor sort of put a hold on it and said, you need to take the time to create a structure so you can live as your real self. Because right now all you have is the unformed real self, because all these other structures that were holding it and hiding it from you are gone. And that reminded me of the story in the Christian Bible of the man from whom Jesus extracted a bad spirit. And Jesus told him, okay, now go to the temple and give thanks, because if you don't, that spirit's going to come back and going to find an empty spot in you and bring 7 more evil spirits with him. So even in our moving forward, we need to do it with caution. But as a goal, and this is where we move toward the silence, as a goal, the more that we are able to allow ourselves to unveil our authentic existence, our authentic self, then the less likely we are to be finding ourselves distracted by what Sister Pepper used to call the carnal distractions of this earth. The nice jewelry, the love affair, the wonderful car, whatever that move us away from allowing our most deep self. And then Emmett Fox here is talking about the same thing. Don't buy into the crap, because the crap besmirches you. So, going back to Hildegard of Bingen, and I suspect the next talk will be precisely about her in detail. For her to enter into silence, and what we might call the silence of meditation, silent prayer, was to enter into the portal where we could move and uncover our uncluttered self. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Hildegard of Bingen, she was a 12th century mystic and visionary, and even at a time when women were regarded as nothing, she was, as I recall, given to a convent at age 8 and locked in a room with only one window where they'd feed her, and she studied and she prayed and all that. Ultimately, at a very young age, was appointed abbess of such an organization, unheard of. But she kept getting messages and kept them to herself until midlife or so, when she asked permission of the Pope or someone up above to share the messages and the wisdom that she was being given. She was Benedictine, by the way, and cloistered. I see that note here. So the key points that she made in what she taught: silence is a path to inner experience, to a stronger connection with the divine. And as we follow that path, it enables us to have insight, to find more power within ourselves, to enter more deeply into the realities of this existence and divine existence. And when we can reach this inner silence comfortably, she says, we will find a deep sense of serenity, of inner space, as if the physical boundaries of our bodies dissolve, so that we finally can understand that we have communion with the infinite world, which is what we've been talking about the last two from Brother Mandis. And then from there, as we begin being our authentic self, then we can start speaking authentically. And she doesn't encourage going willy-nilly doing that, but allowing ourselves to be able to, as we continue to cultivate practices of silent prayer. And she includes also, by the way, as part of silent prayer, communing with nature. So she was actually, fairly far out from the patriarchal Christianity that was being taught back then. And she makes the note that silence and contemplation lead to appreciation, lead to gratitude, to general awareness of everything, to wisdom, and a heart perspective, which is essential to navigating the challenges of this world. And in fact, In one writing, she suggests that what we strive each of us to become is a house of prayer. House of prayer. And that to me reminds me of the Orthodox practice of unceasing prayer. Now, in their case, to them, unceasing prayer is you have this one mantra, have pity on me, oh dear God, a sinner, and it has 2 or 3 more lines I don't remember. And you keep saying it until it runs ceaselessly like a broken record, no matter what you're doing in life. I'm inclined, the Quakers are inclined, and I think most Western mystics are inclined toward ceaseless prayer being continually open to the movement of divine, to our connection with the divine, to the divine, knowing, feeling the divine within us, and that we are part of the divine, and that all infinity of existence, and we are all. And that, when we're walking through this body, is quite a challenge. But within that, we can also have the freedom and the strength, and I don't want to say courage, because it doesn't require courage when you're wrapped up in the divine, but to live the authentic, loving, spiritual life. And next week we're going to talk about living as an authentic self, or 2 weeks. I will be gone next week, and Lori will be talking. And we'll go from here with Hildegard de Bingen. So folks, that's what I've got to say today. Anyone have something they want to toss in? Ellie, go ahead.
It's interesting that, the way you were speaking about the false fronts and false selves and, fragile sense of self-worth. As you were discussing those points, those things, the 2 terms that I've been acquainting myself with, and it's, in the autistic community, really, it's masking and unmasking. I'm a part of a couple autistic groups online, neurodivergent, autistic, what have you. And a lot of the conversation resolves around those 2 terms, masking and unmasking. And from what I'm gathering, is the masking is basically what you're talking about, the false fronts and the false self of how, being autistic or ADHD, or odd, DHD, combining the autistic and ADHD together, we mask those things, because we are so different from the neurotypical. We think differently, we have different behaviors, we have different things that, if we do those things, or if we say the way we're thinking, we're going to be seen as different. Because if we don't bring those things out, we're going to be seen as normal, and we fit in better. And, masking is exhausting, because those of us that can hold jobs, that can do those normal things in society, it is very exhausting, not being able to be our authentic self. And in these couple of groups, these, men and women are like, it's very exhausting when I can't be who I am because of, whatever their reasons are. And, as I'm reading this, and listening, I ordered a book. It's called The Divergent Mind, and it's, for women, but I'm sure, sorry, my doggies were barking out the window. I'm sure, men can take to heart too, is how this normal world isn't meant for those of us that are different. There's a box and we have to fit in the box. Otherwise, if we don't, we're going to be excluded from many things. And so, I'm learning that to unmask has its challenges. We don't know how to because we've been put in this box, whatever that box is. And so as you were, talking about the gal that was in the convent, or her name, I can't remember her name, but
Hildegard.
I'm sorry.
Hildegard.
I've heard her story before, and it sounds to me that she would fit very much in the pagan community, as as we think of that, the silent praying, communing with nature, um, knowing what that looks like, meaning a pagan community versus the patriarchal society and community. And I'm finding it interesting when I'm reading these different books and history, that before the patriarchal system, this was very much seen as normal. Communing with nature, healing, the feminine, etc. But then, as the patriarchy society came, that wasn't focused on as much. However, the Celtic, they revered their women. They actually could hold property. They, went to war. They weren't domesticated as many of the women were. So I don't know. To me, it's a flip. It's like, the men did all this, went to war, went to work, went to the field. But then you have this whole other area where the women did this. Anyway, so thank you for your talk, and it shows me when I read the history, when I hear your talks, that if we can get to that point that you were talking about being our authentic self and speaking authentically, how much better we can feel about ourselves. Those you brought up, those those that were abused, have a harder time doing that, because those of us that have gone through that, the depression, the mental abuse, all of that, it seems we were put in those boxes. We were those round circles put in those square boxes. And to me, those boxes were meant to be broken. I've never been one of those women that have sat quietly by the sidelines. Once I learned my voice, I've been very vocal and gotten me in quite a bit of trouble, but I've never regretted it, because I look at it as being able to be a voice for those women, for those people who can't. So when you bring out these people that you bring out, those things, those people, I feel need to be honored more. In some way and form, to show that, yes, those people have been throughout history. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Ellie. Lori has something to say.
Kind of piggybacky on what Ellie was saying. Let me lower my hand here. There we go. What we're talking about is basically what my business is about. And in this respect, I I was speaking to somebody on my podcast. I was interviewing somebody on my podcast the other day, and I mentioned the word misogyny, and she said, actually, the entire culture is misogynistic, not just people. And I said, you're 100% right. I mean, it was built from that perspective of by men for men, by white men for white men, of privilege, of of money and all that. And when Ellie talks about masking, um, there's a part of me that wants to smile because we all do this thing where we think there's a norm. There is no norm. Um, and we run around going, I want to stay out of trouble, I want to be accepted, and we try to behave in a way that we have decided would be acceptable by other people. We just put it out there and then live by something that's not us. And so I think authentic is living by your emotion, your emotional truths, and your alignment between the mind and the heart, which allows in the energy. Anyway, that's my thought.
Thank you. Somebody else with a thought to share?
I just, it reminds me of the Enneagram, which was a very old system, and how each of us learns to survive in the environment that we grow up in. And the Enneagram is an interesting tool to kind of look at and see where you fall. And then it's also a growth tool, so it's not, you're not to use it, you're not supposed to put yourself in a box or other people, but it is a tool for looking at how when you were young you create a persona, so to speak, that is able to survive in the environment that you grow up in. Anyway, it just makes me think of that.
Okay. Yes, Bob.
Well, as you mentioned in your talk, that we all create masks very early at an age of 3 or 4 years old. We're creating these masks, and we're developing our emotions, our feelings, and beliefs. It starts very, very early, based on our environment, basically. So there are a number of ways that we can change those emotions and beliefs. You do lift, right? And I do theta healing. Both of these modalities focus on specifically those feelings, emotions, and beliefs, right? So that's the quick way, let's say, to get connected. So I feel great that there are people that are doing these modalities and really helping a lot of people. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not like we've been given an unmanageable ladder to climb into the clouds to do it, though some people believe that's the only way they can.
Yeah.
But speaking for myself, by grace of God, long before theta healing or lift, I was still guided to people who could help me get well to the point of moving toward my authentic self.
Yeah.
When I've been told that it was impossible. So
There's the
if you
slow
ask
way, there's the fast way, and we like the fast way, right?
oh yeah. And I like where I am now much better than where I was when I started.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to the divine that, and I suppose that's a point to be made. If you find yourself feeling struggling with your masks, to ask the divine for help, and miracles do happen. Though, as Sister Pepper sometimes said, just remember, sometimes the miracle comes through someone who has an MD after their name. Or a PsyD, I suppose, as well. Okay, folks, we thank everyone for coming today. We thank all the ancestors who made us who we are. We thank all the spirits who are helping us to walk forward into broad sunlit uplands where we can live our authentic selves and be in divine service and in constant divine connection, knowing we are as God is, and we're doing our best to be in service and to represent this divine love. We thank the divine for watching us as we depart from here, guiding our steps, our words, our actions, that we bring only good to those around us and to the world. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, dear God, for all this love and all the healings. And we'll see you all back next week.